First of all, we had the clothes which we were wore there, which was full of disease and lice. We had to go through showers, then some powder. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I know disinfected with a powder. They gave us different clothes also, and then we were transported to the other brick buildings. We were assigned so many people to a room, and there were bunk beds there. We shared the room with other people. We were weak enough to get along with everybody. We were all happy just to be alive and be liberated. But you see, reading the lists from other camps, from the survivors that lived through this, we did not find anybody, which at this point, what kept me going was all this, and I was fine. But when I didn't find anybody, this is the time I caved in. I only lived with that hope that I will meet my family. I had such a wonderful home life, such loving parents, and I had 2 brothers. And besides it, I don't count the rest of the family, like uncles and aunts and cousins. I think it was almost close to 60 people. We had such a big relation. And none of us survived to the end. There was my sister and I and 2 cousins that survived all this.
After World War II, displaced person camps were placed in Western Germany, France, Belgium, and Italy. Ironically, the DP camps were previous Nazi concentration camps. They were used for a place for Jews to heal physically and mentally from what had happened to them in the Holocaust. Organizations like the URNNA helped survivors in DP camps locate relatives who also survived the death camps. At first, the conditions were harsh. German prisoners and Nazi collaborators stayed in the camps and often lived in the same houses as the Jews. Starvation and disease also struck. The Jews were still living in the same crowded and unsanitary conditions of the ghettos. Sonia Weiss explains her experience as, "We were a mess. There were 6 of us sharing an apartment. One of the men had worked in the gas chambers. I didn't feel good about that I survived. Life wasn't worth all the effort I made. We looked terrible. I didn't have any hair. Most of my teeth were gone. I was like a mess. I was fat because I was eating anything I could. I'm glad I don't have a picture from those times." Conditions changed in 1945 when Earl G. Harrison, an envoy of U.S. President Harry Truman, visited the displaced person camps and observed the treatment of the Jews. He found the conditions horrifying and immediately wanted to help. Harrison wrote a report about what he saw so he could convince President Truman and America to help the Jews. After returning home from his trip, Harrison writes in his report about the grim conditions and complete idleness Jews experienced in the camps. He stressed the importance of the recovery for Jews with the help of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. They collected $78.7 million from Jews in America to supply the camps with more food, clothing, medicine, and better homes. His contribution forced America to start to understand what had happened to the Jews during the Holocaust. By mid-1947, the number of Jewish DPs in Germany, Austria, and Italy had reached 250,000. Each survivor dealt with their emotions from the Holocaust in different ways. The reality that they lost loved ones hit them, and they feared they would be alone for the rest of their lives. In the DP camps, 80% of Jewish survivors found another survivor as their mate. They usually married someone from their hometown or a distant relative. The marriages expressed how desperately Jews needed connections with people. They needed someone to share their feelings with in order for them to comprehend what had actually happened. They might not have loved the person they married, but they could help each other through the same situation. In some extreme cases, younger women would prefer older men to marry. They felt more safe with an older man who could protect them from more evil. Or people from different backgrounds who would have never gotten married if the Holocaust did not happen, got married because they lived in the same ghetto or concentration camp. Many marriages happened on a single day. Babies were the primary reason survivors wanted marriage immediately after liberation. A child represented a clean slate, one not poisoned by horror. Jews believed they had to start regrowing their population after so many had been wiped out. Rebuilding their lives meant making new families. And since many survivors did not have a normal childhood because they were young in the camps, they did not understand how to raise a child. They had children that would never understand what their parents had went through, therefore impacting their children's lives forever. Joseph Berger, a child of parents who survived the Holocaust, shares his experience in his book, Displaced Persons, Growing Up in America After the Holocaust. He explains how his parents felt raising a child after immigrating to America. They often ask unanswerable questions like, why did they survive and not their parents or brothers and sisters? Who was this God who closed his eyes to such suffering? What was his purpose in having them survive? After finally settling in the camps, Jews were ready to leave, but they received little or no education while in the ghettos or concentration camps. Schools were set up in the DP camps to prepare Jews to get a job when they were able to immigrate. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society helped refugees in America to find homes and jobs in New York City. Some of the jobs were sewing, working in laundromats, repairing furniture, or selling door to door. Although the Nazis were the ones to blame, survivor guilt tormented Jews who blamed themselves for not helping to save a loved one. Some couldn't live with themselves because they survived and their children did not. They thought of themselves as selfish because they didn't give up their food for someone they loved, when they barely received enough for themselves. Survivors hung on to the past and could not escape. It disrupted the new lives they were trying to make for themselves. In the DP camps, orchestras and theaters were set up for Jews' entertainment. There was even sporting events for Jews to compete in. Huge celebrations were held for Jewish holidays since they weren't able to celebrate them in the camps. These social events helped the Jews to find new people to fill family roles and rebuild the lives the Nazis took from them.
People and Feldafing were from all over Europe. It wasn't only from Poland. We had Hungarian Jews, Romanian Jews, Czech Jews, and also Greek Jews in this camp. Everyone just walking around and trying to mingle and find someone. Like I said, we never did. But what the Americans also did is organize art schools. They brought in films. They brought in, organized our people, survivors that were musicians, and also traveling from other camps. They were giving concerts, and believe it or not, even dances for those that were well enough to attend all this. And also our own police force to police that it would be safe, from other intruders. They kept us busy. But the problem was there was no future in being there. Where do we go from there?
Eventually, immigration was being discussed. Restrictions on immigration to Palestine, Canada, and the United States were lifted. On May 14, 1948, the United States and Soviet Union recognized the State of Israel. Congress also passed the Displaced Persons Act in 1948, authorizing 200,000 DPs to enter America. 80,000 Jewish DPs immigrated to America by 1952, about 136,000 to Israel, and another 20,000 to other nations. The Jewish displaced person camps were closed by 1952, and the Jewish DPs began their new lives around the world.